Let's take a look at this story now. It's one of our top stories tonight. Former Water Affairs Minister Nomvula Mokonyane has rubbished claims that she received bribes from Bosasa when she appeared before the Zondo Commission. The former minister said Angelo Agriti has a vendetta against her and other ANC leaders. Political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng joins us to discuss Mokonyane's testimony. Asanda, good evening and thank you so much for your time. There was much hype around the first day that Nomvula Mokonyane would have an opportunity to respond to the damning allegations that Angelo Agriti made that involved her, that also involved her party, the ANC. After the day's testimony and her wrapping up the evidence, do you think that she's been able to answer the pressing questions of the day?
Thank you so much for having me. I think, Nomvula Mokonyane did what was expected and what is become expected of particularly African National Congress politicians, which is to deny, and to pretend like they have no idea what people are talking about. And I think, what her testimony is showing us is that at some stage, the Zondo Commission is going to have to begin to show us what the value of some of this testimony that we are seeing is and how it's going to help or not help in terms of building cases against people like Nomvula Mokonyane. Of course, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. But part of the whole point of something like the Zondo Commission is for us to hear the whole truth and the full truth. But I don't think that, Nomvula gave us as much truth as we wanted to hear today. And I think some of the things that she denied are things that are easily, disputable. And it will be interesting to see what journalists and other interested parties come up with in terms of proving that she may have lied on the stand about some of the things that she has been accused of and some of the things that she denied today.
Let's take a look at some of the detail because Mokonyane doesn't deny the close relationship with Bosasa or even Gavin Watson's family, and she locates that relationship to being from within the structures of the ANC, and it seems that whatever work that Bosasa was doing was also closely linked to the organization. So this brings us to an even bigger issue of the transparency of funding and how exactly that world has been governed to date without perhaps the legislation in place that pushes for that transparency.
I mean, I think it's become very obvious that it was a good thing that the Constitution that the court finally, pushed for us to have some transparency around political party funding, because I think that the ANC, and it's not just the ANC, we know the DA, we know the EFF, we know all of these political parties have some links to some dodgy individuals who fund them. And because we haven't been able to demand, the kind of transparency that through the new legislation we're going to be able to demand, it's been quite difficult to start unpacking some of the unethical practices of these political parties. And I think, we haven't really had the conversation as a country around how do political parties get funded in a way that they are friends, they are, business interests that they held before they became political parties in government, and what happens to those and how do we manage those and what are the ethics around, some of the things that are done. Because a lot of the time politicians very easily and very quickly jump onto things that are allegedly not illegal, but are actually not ethical and are actually not moral. And we know that law starts with ethics and it starts with morality. And what we need to see in South Africa is politicians who respect both the moral imperative to do right and also the ethical imperative to do right before you even get to the legal requirement to do right. And I think that somebody like Nomvula Mokonyane has shown us that the ANC may have not necessarily acted illegal in some instances, but there's a lot of ethical murkiness, there's a lot of gray areas that need to be looked at around political party funding, around the kind of relationships that political parties are able to have, and around the kind of business interests that political parties are also able to have. Because really, when you think about it, political parties like, the governing ANC should not be involved in any business whatsoever, because otherwise, there's a whole lot of unfairness that goes on, and there's a whole lot of an inability to allow people to freely compete in a market and to freely compete. I don't necessarily believe in the free market, but I think political parties cannot both be the political patrons and also be, holding the keys to business interests and able to themselves as entities partake in business. It doesn't make sense to me at all. I don't think that should be allowed at all. And even if it's technically legal, it's not ethical and it's not moral, and that's why it shouldn't be done.
Let's talk about the business relationships that Mokonyane has talked about, because she's also listed other companies that were happy to be beneficiaries of the governing party, including Telkom in one of the SOEs. And she mentioned this quite a number of times, and clearly trying to move away from this idea that all companies that give money to the ANC are automatically associated with allegations of corruption or that they are guilty of any form of wrongdoing. Does this bring us any closer then to perhaps having an electorate that will demand greater transparency from their own political parties? Because whether or not she may have been involved in the affairs of Bosasa illegally, what Bosasa was getting up to as a public entity was not her business, and therefore she can always, there's plausible deniability that this is not my company, I don't get to account for the affairs of Bosasa.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I'm saying that we need to start distinguishing between the fact that just because something is legal, it doesn't mean that it's ethical, and it doesn't mean that it's moral. And I think that one of the best things to come out of this year is the fact that we're going to be able to have independent candidates in this country, because I think the political party system has failed us, and I think that the political party system has been abused by many politicians in order to basically create, this entity and this group of people who are able to run the country both at a political level and an economic level. And there's a reason why there's a separation of powers between, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And also there's a reason why there are ethical considerations that need to be made in terms of the relationship between business and the three pillars of government. And what we're seeing, particularly with this Zondo Commission in general, but in particular, when we look at this Bosasa case, is a clear blurring of the lines. There's a clear blurring of the lines in terms of who in cabinet was engaging with what should have been technically an independent business. And it also raises many questions for people who actually had competitive products that they could have sold to South Africa, and who had, a possibility of giving us better prison systems and a possibility of giving us better security. And if we look at the kind of country that we have, and the kind of country that is struggling with crime, that is struggling with, an inability to make sure that people are held accountable once they have been arrested, you really want that correctional services to be the best that is possible. And what we're seeing now tells us that Bosasa really didn't have to do much in order for it to be the preferred bidder. And this is highly problematic, because it raises a lot of questions about how the correctional services is run or was run in the country, and what the possibilities are for its future practices. Because if you think about it, if Bosasa was allowed to run in a specific way, that then sets the precedence for how correctional services is done in this country. And if you look at the corruption around that, you then start to question, what are these practices that we have inherited that are inherently corrupt within the system itself and within the tendering system in general? And I think we need to have a bigger conversation about the tendering system, about the abuse of power within the tendering system, and about political relationships and how they are wielded for and against particular individuals within the system.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Asanda Ngoasheng is a political analyst.